an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Goldenhand, chapters 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. The general looks dead. Fish are more important. Unruly bells, which wish to ring. The Skyhorse clan can never go to sea in spring. The threat of free magic, and the Skyhorse clan can never pursue past the greenwash. I swear, these chapter titles. In these chapters, poor Farron. I'm super glad that she got picked up by friendly people rather than the people that she could have maybe got picked up by. But this bitch is a bitch. I'm sure that your message is super important, but you're very young and I bet everything seems super important. And fish, that's what's truly important in life. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Yama for commissioning this episode. Thank you, Yama. Yama said my hair looks great. These headphones add a lot of volume. Yeah, I am so irritated by this fucking fisherwoman. Although I will say this, I am delighted to have had this weird ass pain in the butt obstacle thrown in Farron's way, because she can't just get picked up and immediately brought to where she needs to go with no fight. That's not interesting. But also making her wait a couple of days. That's not that's just too long, which is what the fisherwoman, whose name I'm forgetting, but we'll remember shortly, is suggesting. And so we get this nice sort of compromise where she doesn't get what she wants right away. And she winds up getting kind of what she wants due to a terrible injury, which may cost her her foot. And also, it's a woman who is this fucking stubborn and determined to get her hold full of fish. And I think that's what kept being surprising to me, is it's pretty rare for a female character to be written as this unbending and by the book. By the book isn't even really an appropriate phrase here because she wrote the book. She's the boss. So what is it's just unyielding and frankly unreasonable. Honestly, that's really the word. This bitch doesn't need to be like this. It's just what she has chosen. And that's the part that's the most annoying. There's nobody checking her fucking inventory and judging the fact that she came back without a full hold. Nobody cares. She's the only one who takes this seriously. It's all her pride. And just the fact that I've never come back without a full hold, and sometimes my crew has had to starve. And I pride myself on that. If this bitch, you know what she's like? She's like one of those fucking middle managers that works 50 hours a week and expects you to do the same thing, even though you are not management and you do not care. That's what she's like. And she kills herself at work. And because she does, she has this thing about how everybody should. And girl, nobody's here for this. Come on. And her people seem to still really respect her, and they're careful about the way that they talk to her and everything. I assume she must pay well, because otherwise I don't know what the fuck they're doing listening to. She is a, you know what? I'm getting ahead of myself here. why don't we back it up and start talking about The General Looks Dead? Guys, what are these chapter titles? I saw that chapter title when I was finishing up the last chapter coverage, and I was like, I almost started laughing to myself. I was like, what? So we start off chapter 6 right before where the creature in the case ends, and it's Clariel coming over to Nick being really like kind of woozy and out of it, and she's not sure if like he is still like even able to respond to her, if he has like enough of his consciousness back. And she has that thistle, and even she isn't prepared for how well the thing works. It's pretty cool, actually, to realize that from her perspective. Honestly, it's pretty cool to reread this entire chapter or part of this chapter from her perspective after having read it from Nick's perspective initially. Like, this is some Midnight Sun kind of shit, and I am interested. This seems to be the last time that we'll get this, so I'm trying to enjoy it while I can, but it is pretty fun because Clariel's like in love with fucking Nicholas, and she does not know how to deal with that at all. At all. She is a mess. It is hilarious, honestly. She's like saying shit, and then she stops and she's like, ugh, I'm just talking nonsense. What the fuck did I just say even? And then she like goes to touch him because she's like helping heal him, and immediately pulls away, and then she's like, I have to touch him to heal him. Why am I acting this way? And she's still like, it's so obvious, and she won't admit it to herself that that's what's happening. And it's just like, sweetie, you're making this so difficult. It doesn't have to be like this, sweetie. You could have a good time if you just, you know. And it's weird. It's not even like really, it doesn't feel like it's about fear of rejection for her. It feels like it's about her own ineptitude, inadequacy at dealing with like her own feelings. It doesn't feel like her fears are about Nicholas. They're about her, you know? Anyway, so she does the thing with the spear with the thistle on it. I love when she says, I don't know if Sabriel would even have known what it was, that she stops and she's like, oh God, now I sound like I'm bragging. And they have essentially the conversation that I talked about already. So I am not going to go over all of that again, but they get interrupted about, like towards the end of, right after he says, I can walk if you'll help me. They get interrupted by this fucking guy. This dude, Captain, let's see. Oh yeah, here it is. With a distant boom, another star shell blossomed high above, casting its harsh light across the barren landscape as it slowly drifted down on its silken parachute. The sudden illumination was accompanied by more shouting. It came from a tall, remarkably slender, and very pallid Ancelstier general. He was so pale that for a moment Clariel almost reached for a bell, thinking he must actually be a dead creature, even though she had not felt the presence of such a thing. But he was alive, and protesting. This dude, I am almost embarrassed. This guy has zero control over his people. He is really, like, first of all, dressed wrong for this whole, like, he should be in combat clothing here. Everybody else is wearing khaki, and they're wearing like male, basically protective armor. And this dude has, it says, a swallow-tailed coat of scarlet with many miniature medals, though a keen observer would note none of them were for valor or wartime service. His black trousers had a broad red stripe down the sides, and his dress shoes were very much the worse for crossing the mud and debris of no man's land. So he starts yelling and pointing at fucking Nicholas and telling all of his people to arrest Nicholas. I'm sorry, bitch. Who are you? And none of his people are in the least interested in paying attention to his orders here. Not even a tiny bit. They are going so far as to ignore him even when he is literally in the middle of trying to yank a weapon out of one of the men's hands, which I swear to God, I could not stop cackling. I found that so funny. He is just over here just like, and the guy's like, God, that's weird. Is there, God, wind is really strong today. Like, he's not even acknowledging this guy. Whew, how little control do you have when they are willing to flat out, this is going to, I feel like this is either going to come back to bite these guys in the ass, and this general is going to turn out to be like a problem with a P, or this guy is never going to come up again, and this is going to remain just a really annoying little blip. But I feel like you can't establish a guy who is this sort of, because it turns out a little later, he is irritated that his dinner was interrupted. And that's why he's like getting all up on, let's arrest Nick. It's not even that he really seems to think Nick did anything criminal. It's just like, well, this is the source of the disruption to my evening, so I'm going to take care of this. And because he's that petty and really, when you come down to it, uninterested in like the actual law or doing what's actually an effective thing, I imagine he is going to have to come up later. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if it turns out that he's got a little bit of a grudge and turns out to be like a thorn in their side, but like one of those really annoying thorns that's just, you forget about until there's something crucial happening, and then all of a sudden it just pops up and ruins everything. But we shall come back to him, because then we go to chapter 7, and it is from Farron's perspective, and she gets picked up, and all of these people on this fishing ship see the black stream of smoke coming up. And Farron, for her part, is extremely exhausted just from like the chase and the journey anyway, but she's now injured. And later on, we see that the injury is infected and gets to the point where she may have to have her foot amputated. And so she is not waking up. This bitch passed out. And the people from the fishing boat, when they pull her up, they are very careful to let go of the weirdo pot of trail of black smoke that smells like free magic. And I didn't really think about this because I assumed that whomever caught up with Farron was going to be a baddie. And it never really occurred to me what somebody would think if they were a good person, or at least not actively evil. And they came upon her with her like pot of fucking hellfire, basically. I mean, it doesn't look great. And we know that this, was sourced from inside of a piece of protective magic, the arrowhead and all of that, but they don't know that. So what this looks like to them is just some strange girl floating alone with free magic fire burning in this pot. And that has got to put people a little bit on edge, and I'm not really going to blame them for that. So there were 4 fisher folk on the boat, all from one family, 2 sons and a daughter, under the command of their mother and captain, a woman named Clariel. I forgot about that. Clariel? They were all of medium height, but broad-shouldered and with mighty forearms from drawing heavy nets, their skin cured by sun, wind, and sea to a shade that matched the timber of their boat, which, as was the fisherfolk's custom, had no name. Clariel bore the charter mark on her brow and knew a few spells. Most were simple charms, to find their way at night or in fog, to locate the bigger shoals of fish, to gain warning of storms. But the captain also knew a healing spell, one employed many a time to quell the bleeding from a knife cut or to soothe a bad rope burn. She cast that spell upon Farron's wounded ankle, or tried to. Though she was sure she had found the right marks in the great swim of Charter and joined them just so, the bright symbols skittered from the nomad's skin and broke apart into nothingness. I do not remember, because I think Farron's injury came from the shot that was fired at her from the top of the guard wall, right? They didn't use free magic to injure her. So why isn't her skin taking the Charter magic? What is that about? Because with Nick, eventually Clariel is able to put a spell on him for healing that sticks, but it takes a lot more energy and it's like a much more intense spell than she usually has to use. With Farron, what is it about her that's rejecting it? Is it the way, like, you know, she is being prepared as an offering to the Witch with No Face as a host body. So if that's the case, is she imbued with some kind of magic that keeps her from being affected by Charter magic so that the witch would also not be affected? Like, I just assumed that anything like that wouldn't really work until the witch was inside her. But I don't know why I thought that. I don't really have any evidence for that. Oh, thank you, Ayatu. Ayatu said my makeup looks good. Thank you. So the spell does not actually sink in and start doing its work, but it does wake Farron up. And Farron pretty much panics and begins to, like, even when they're like, we're not going to hurt you, we're not going to do anything, relax. Farron's like, yeah, I'll relax. I'll relax you right to hell. Like, she's relaxing, hoping that if she does, they will, so that then she can stop relaxing and try and get away immediately. And I just, there's a part of me that's like, I get it. And another part of me that's like, girl, you have got to recognize that you are not in a position to be running off right now. Like, come on. That's not happening for you. I'm sorry, sweetie. You're where you are. And you just should count your blessings that these are not free magic sorcerers that picked you up and just be happy with that. So Clariel says something about how she looks like she's from the 20 tribes. And I thought that she was also, but I guess I misunderstood because she says that she's from the mountains and not the steppe, and that the 20 tribes are only of the steppe. And she tells them her real name, in quotes, her real name. And Clariel is kind of like, okay, so what were you doing on this like weird raft with this burning pot of free magic? And Farron says, I'm a messenger, that I have to get this like really urgent message to the witches that live in the iceberg. And Clariel is like, yeah, you know, there's a bridge, right? You didn't need to be on this raft. And Farron's like, yeah, I know there's a fucking bridge. I'm not an idiot. They are after me. You see the wound in my leg, right? Like, what do you think? Thanks for the fucking information. And when Clariel mentions the Chlorr, Farron is like, she says, yes, I do, but I do not say so, because names may call the named, or others who listen for the name, on the wind. Already I know there are many who do not want my message to arrive. Which, that's interesting. I mean, I don't remember if this has come up before, but has there been an instance in the other books where they didn't want to say the name of a thing? I feel like I want to say that happened with Caragor, but now that I think about it, I don't think that was the case, was it? So yeah, Farron talks about how like the fire came from the glass arrowhead, and that this message that she carries is just as important for this woman's people as it is for her own people. And she asks the lady, will you take me to the southern side of the greenwash? And Clariel looks away and stares at the like raft that has the line of smoke coming off it and says that she should have sunk it because the smoke is going to draw attention. And she asks Farron to swear to keep the peace and follow orders. And Farron's like, I mean, maybe if you will promise to take me to the southern shore and I will even pay you. And she says, I mean, we'll go to the greenwash, the southern side of it, but not until we have all of the fish that we need. And Farron is like, I'll pay you for the fish. What are you talking about? Did you hear me? This is really important. And this woman tells her that it might take 3 or 4 days before they head home. Farron says that the message is very important. We can't waste time, to which Clariel says time is never wasted fishing. Oh my God. Bitch, I am going to kill you. I just got so angry when I read that line. I was like, did you really just say that? She tells her in a few seconds, like, that lives depend on this. And she's just like, yeah, but like, do they? What are you talking about? How can you even, and then when she like finally talks Farron down, where is it? Here it is. I tell you, even the delay of 3 days may mean the deaths of many of my people and perhaps of yours too. My message is truly important. You are young and a long way from home, said Clariel. I expect they told you your message is more important than it really is. Otherwise, they would have sent an older messenger. Oh, bitch. I am about to shove these goddamn fish down your fucking throat. Do not fix your mouth to tell her what's important. You fuck. I can't even be like, oh, they saved her life. Like, they did, but she's literally about to just let that bitch's foot rot off her body because her pride dictates that somebody else beg her to go and bring this girl to a doctor by sacrificing their wages. Clariel is a capitalist, and I am not interested. Clariel, as far as I am concerned, you're a villain. You're a villain. Okay? Bad person who, I guess, probably only picked Farron up because your fucking shipmates were like, hey, Mom, don't you think we shouldn't let her die? I bet you if she had been left to her own devices, she wouldn't even have done it. Ugh. Disgusted. That... In any case, if it's anything of great significance, the Chlorr will have seen it. Now we are wasting time. Will you swear and in 3 days be landed safe to take your message onward? And poor Farron is like, fuck, I guess. What else am I going to fucking say? And Clariel tells her, okay, your first job is to sleep and heal. And Farron asks if she can like see over the edge of the boat to get an idea of where they are. And as she looks out and sort of, gets a handle on things, the wound is really hurting her. Like, it's bad. She almost completely blacks out and like falls because of how bad it is. And once she looks out over the edge, she starts to like immediately drop off because the pain has just drained her so badly. Let's see. Clariel shouted commands and the mainsail was hoisted. The slap of the waves on the hull became louder. aiming for the banks, the uprising of the seabed 50 or 60 leagues distant, where the great shoals of Bateeth swarmed, waiting to be caught. And there's a pursuit that we come upon a little bit later. Chapter 8 is where I think the most interesting shit happens. First, we have the fucking general ordering everybody to arrest Nicholas, and absolutely nobody listens to him. Eventually, the general says, "I'll do it myself." He fumbled at his belt looking for a revolver, realized he was in mess dress and so unarmed, and reached out to take the rifle from the nearest soldier, who, while pretending nothing was happening, also did not let go. I swear to God, I want to see that on film so bad. That sounds hilarious. Oh, God. No, said Clariel calmly, as the general continued to tug at the weapon. She reached for the charter, gathered 5 marks swiftly from the shining torrent flowing through her mind, and flung them from her hand as a net of golden light that settled over the general's bald head. He let go of the rifle, lifted one hand up towards his ear, emitted something between a burp and a hiccup, and collapsed to the ground, caught at the last minute by the sergeant next to him, who dropped his pipe and cursed. And I like it later on, they put him in a stretcher, and they are not gentle with him at all. Everybody's clearly low-key like, fuck this guy, I hate this dude. I hope his head hits the ground multiple times. There's no way he'll know who did it. He'll just wake up in pain. So she winds up talking to Sergeant Major Neild of the Scouts. And it's like, let's see, the warrant officer, is this the woman? I feel like Neild's is a woman. Oh no, who dropped his pipe and cursed. Okay, so this person's, because later on she talks to somebody who's in charge, who's a woman. And they seem very eager for Clariel to take Nicholas off their hands. So Neild is asking her what the creature was, because nobody has ever seen anything like that before. And she explains the rule. And she says that we really have to go. And the sergeant major is like, Captain Tyndall said that Nicholas Sayre was not to go into the Old Kingdom. We have very, very top level orders to not let him go. And let's see. He says he caught sight of Mr. Sayre in pursuit. He never saw the creature at all. But there's orders from General Tyndall and Colonel Green, who command the Scouts. Mr. Sayre is not to be allowed to cross. Clariel is aware that there are guards behind her, even as she's saying, but he needs to come with us. She's like, they're preparing to like enforce this physically if I disagree. And she asks the sergeant, you know that I'm the person in waiting, right? This dude has a lot of free magic in him. And then she says some shit that is upsetting, kids. She says, we need to help him remain human, whispered Clariel, hoping Nick couldn't hear. Let us go, and I will send message hawks to become telegrams to all who need explanation. It will not be your responsibility. And I'm just like, what? You need to help him remain human? What the fuck does that mean? Dislike. Nicholas has been through so much already. Can we give him a fucking break, please? This poor guy. Christ's sakes, you know? Let him be. So the sergeant's like, well, I could see that maybe the general collapsed here and prevented us from ever getting near whatever the hell was even happening. And Clariel says, oh yeah, I mean, if that's the story you want to go with, I did put a spell on him that will make him forget everything that happened after sunset. So that would work. And I like that the sergeant major and the sergeant are both like Word? You can do that? Well, shit. Okay. So they get him on the stretcher. Clariel picks up Nick. She's looking at him, and she sees the charter marks moving across his skin, which means that the healing spell is still working. And even though she's glad to see that, there was a part of me that was kind of like, how long does this shit take? Like, I felt like the fact that it was still going was a little bit alarming. I want this to have worked by now. So the captain's bellowing orders. Charter marks flared in the stones of the wall as Clariel passed the gate. She reached out to touch them, comforted by the warm, familiar sensation of connection. It made her feel less pessimistic about Nick. She walked on, still thinking, until surprised by a shout of alarm from behind her. Clariel spun about, hands reaching for Bellen's sword. Half a dozen paces behind her, the guards carrying Nick quickly put him down and backed away. But there was no sudden acrid stench of free magic, no flashes of white lightning. Whatever power lurked within Nick had not risen forth. Rather, it was charter marks flowing into him that alarmed the guards. Marks were floating off the stones of the wall, as if some strange, invisible tide lifted them. Spinning in the air, they spiraled down to fall upon Nicholas Sayre everywhere from his toes to his pale forehead. The marks lay there for a moment like fresh fallen snowflakes and then sank in, passing through clothes and flesh. More and more marks, multiplying by the second, emerging from every stone, falling so densely that they formed small rivers, waterfalls of golden light. So many marks they could not be seen individually, and when Clariel rushed to Nick's side and caught some in her open hand, they were not marks she knew. "What do we do?" asked Captain Anlo anxiously. Oh, this is the woman, I think, right? "I've never seen this before." "They're not defensive," Clariel said slowly. "The wall isn't trying to stop him crossing." She let the marks she'd caught fall. They did not go straight down, but drifted sideways to Nick. She felt something of their nature, something akin to the depths of a charter stone, though she could not place them more accurately than this. And she had no idea why they were flowing so strongly into Nick, or what spell all those marks might be weaving together. So, all of the different guards are a little bit weird about picking Nick up again. And Clariel at first is like, I mean, okay, these are charter marks that none of us recognize, and I can understand being a little bit worried about that. But the guards are really more hesitant than I would expect. And then it says she realized it wasn't Nick they didn't want to approach, it was her. And they were afraid because the bells in the bandolier across her chest had begun to shiver in place, and despite their tongues being locked by leather, the faint echo of their voices could be heard like distant music. All the bells sounding together. Y'all, this is the shit that I've been afraid of since I found out that the power the Abhorsen wields is controlled by bells. We have the thing with the clappers that get stilled. We have them being like, strapped to the bandolier upside down so that it's a little bit more difficult for the thing to just swing around. Nevertheless, when you think about how a bell works, I would imagine that these are probably spelled so that it's not merely the ringing of the metal outside that triggers them, that it's the clappers themselves that trigger the magic. But nevertheless, it just felt so imperfect to me. All I could think was like, what if you're climbing and a rock hits a bell? That's all it takes. And it's kind of rung a particular bell. You would have to cover those things so completely in cloth to keep them from being vulnerable that they would no longer be useful, because you wouldn't be able to just unhook it easily to use at a moment's notice defensively. The idea that something like this could happen with these bells has been on my mind, and there's a little part of me that is relieved that the books seem to have finally admit that this is a possibility, because I love the concept of the bells, but to me they seem riddled with potential pitfalls and problems and vulnerabilities. And I was just like, look, I love the symbolism of this. I think it's a really neat idea, but like, come on, man, that's so risky. So anyway, she could feel their vibration and, far worse, feel their power. Whatever was going on with Nick and the inherent magic of the wall, it was also waking the bells or upsetting them or something, and it was beyond Clariel's knowledge or experience. In a second, she went from a confident abhorsen-in-waiting to a very frightened young woman who could think of only one thing to do. Get out. Get the bells away from the charter magic in the wall before she and all the guards and Nicholas were made to sleep, or stripped of their memories, or forced to walk where they would not, or worst of all, be sent unwillingly into death, never to return. Bring him as fast as you can, she shouted, and sprinted north, her hands clasped across the bandolier, willing the bells to be silent. That's a pretty good moment. That's freaky. So then we go back to chapter 9. Farron is sleeping, but like not super well. Again, she has a terrible infection. Chlorr, who is one of the sons of Clariel, says something about how she's likely to lose that foot. And I like the added information that this is as close to saying, what the fuck is wrong with you, you stubborn bitch? We should have gone where she asked, when she asked, as he is willing to get. Because this is his mom, this is his captain, and they just don't talk to her like that. But it's very clear he is not alone in thinking this. And Clariel asks how full they are. And it turns out that they are only about halfway. And Clariel, she can't stop thinking about the fucking fish. Bitch, if you don't... Clariel had never returned from a fishing expedition without a full hold, not in 20 years. Sometimes that meant staying out a week longer than normal, with everyone on half rations of fresh water and nothing to eat but fish. She was famous for it. Full catch Clariel, she was called, though not to her face. I don't really get that, though not to her face. She organizes her entire identity around this. It feels like she would take that as a compliment. I'm not really sure why it's treated like an insult when that seems to be all she's about. But anyway, she won't even look at her son. She's staring out to sea, all fucking dramatic. And he says she might lose her foot, maybe die. To which Clariel is like, yeah, seems like. Ugh. And Chlorr says, we think we should take her back and you can take the loss out of our pay. And Clariel is like, no pay for you this time or the next time. And Chlorr's like, yeah. She takes the money. She just got done saying, money's only money. That's the words that she said to Farron when Farron offered to pay for the loss. Money's only money. But now that it's about her having fucked up, her own children are offering to work for free in order to save this woman's life. And she's like, yeah, all right, I'll take your money. She's a villain. I'm saying, I hate her. 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 I hate her so much. Ugh, I hate her so much. So she tells them to get ready to move about. And it seems pretty quickly Chlorr realizes that she was about to turn around anyway, and that he basically gave up his pay, even though she was going to do it either way. And I'm just like, I just can't believe she's sticking to this. I hate her so much. Ugh. Ayantu says it feels like she should be a man. Like, this level of ego is a lot. That's exactly what I was saying earlier, was that it's really kind of refreshing to have a character this fucking unreasonable be a woman, because it's almost always a dude. When somebody is written as this inflexible and unyielding and unreasonable, it's usually a guy. So part of me is kind of like, oh, I'm almost impressed, but I just hate her so much. So yeah, they turn around and there is a black blot on the horizon that they recognize as a raider that can carry like upwards of 60 people. And immediately they're like, what the fuck? And Lowen is saying, they'll never catch us with this breeze. But we find out a little bit later that there is what they call a wind eater that's on that boat that is keeping them from being able to harness the wind to get away the way they normally would, which wind eater is a great name. I love it. And Lone asks his mother about this truce that is supposed to like continue on until after midsummer. And his mother says the truce is custom, not any kind of law. And I like that because I have just recently, in the last 4 years, begun to truly appreciate how much of what I always thought was law is really just custom in our world as well. And how if people don't mutually agree that we're going to follow the same rules, they can just do whatever the fuck they want. And that's really upsetting to realize. It just makes you feel so incredibly vulnerable. And it makes you lose faith in people. So she says, let's hope they don't have a shaman or a witch on board. And one of them is like, well, don't sorcerers fear the sea? And she's like, yeah, but they have keepers. And if their keepers want them on the sea, that's where they're going to fucking go. Also, they're rowing faster. And later on, we get some word about how like they are continuing to row at speeds and for lengths of time that human beings would have collapsed. So I am going to guess there's some sort of either like really highly intensive slavery or maybe undead creatures being occupied for this. I don't know. Maybe additional magics. So they just decide to do their best. And meanwhile, Farron is still asleep. And it's kind of like a combo dream and flashback. And she's having a talk, as it says, the talk with a capital T, with the elder who had most to do with her, a woman named Jithalal, Jith for short. She thought of it as the talk because it was a common subject often returned to, particularly before the few festivals when Farron was required to join the clan. You are the offering. That means you are the best of us, or you will be. You live apart from us, not because you are not one of the Athask. You live apart because that is what you do for all the people. We are your fathers and mothers. We are all your brothers and sisters. We are all the children you will not bear. You must be the best, for if we were to give less to the witch with no face, she would be displeased. You stand against her the same way the strongest of a war party must turn against overwhelming pursuit, selling their life dearly so the others may escape. And I rather liked this, that it's treated less as she's just this like victim being offered up on a platter, and she is seen as a hero in her way. That's just sort of like a cork, you know, sticking a finger in the dike. I really hate that phrase because of modern language and what that sounds like now, but you guys know what I'm trying to talk about. Anyway, the dream blurred and changed, and all of a sudden Farron was in the offerings chair, which was really only a cushion set into the hollow in the middle of the great round stone that sat above the Athask's people's lower camp where they wintered. A huge bonfire burned on the flat before the stone, sparks flying up to the clear, cold sky and the full moon above. The dancing had finished, and now all the clan were engaged in the traditional act of gratitude to the offering. And so everybody sort of comes up to her and greets her and thanks her and gives her blessings. But then there's one that has a bronze mask and begins to chew on her ankle. And obviously this is because she's having this horrible pain in her leg because of her injury. But it's still a pretty upsetting, like, yikes. And also, of course, I had been saying, I feel like this is Chlorr of the mask. It has to be. And then I was like, is it? Obviously it is. Now we know with this bronze mask thing. So she wakes up and she can tell that something is going on. She had had a fever, which broke. So that seems to be better. But she is still in a huge amount of pain. And they tell her about these raiders who are following her and the wind eater, which they must have aboard, they have deduced by now. And she asks whether or not they are within bow shot. And Kirilke is like, maybe for you. And I rather liked that answer. Just like, for us, no. But you, I don't know. So I came to ask if you know how they can still be rowing at full pace. And Farron's just like, I don't know anything about the sea. Like, my people are afraid of it. I don't know what the capabilities are or are not of regular human beings. I can't really help you. And she lifts Farron up, and as Kirilke lifts her up, this is when Farron, I forgot, she almost passes out here. I thought it was earlier, but it's here. And Kirilke goes and gets the bow and the arrow case. The rowers' chorus could be clearly heard now, even without the benefit of the breeze. They were close and closing. So I love this. There were small fires aboard the pursuing raider, spots of red light that perhaps to some would suggest lit torches, a strange thing to have on a wooden ship. Farron knew better. As she continued to look, and her eyes adapted to the starlight, she noted that most of the ship's oars, though over the side, were held or lashed high. Only 6 oars aside stroked the water, but those 6 moved deep and with inexorable force. And she says, the 12 that are rowing have to be woodweirds. I forgot that she says this because I was thinking that it was undead, but I forgot that she actually says what she thinks it is. Untiring and easily 4 or 5 times as strong as the strongest warrior. There must also be at least 12 witches or shamans aboard with their keepers. No, 13, for the Wind Eater could not also command a woodweird. That is a really dope use of a woodweird. Having them like row like this, I like it. It's efficient. That's smart. Good idea. She mentions the witch with no face, to which Kirilke is like, what is that? What? And Farron's like, look, we might not live, but if we do, I will tell you all about her, I promise, but not now. So it says she was sitting on a swaying platform, a drumbeat of pain echoing from ankle to leg to head, her eyes blurred. It was night. Farron drew and shot, and her arrow sped across the starlit waters. So let me go to chapter 10. Clariel is sprinting away from the wall. Despite the bell's stillness, she ran on another 50 paces before she stopped and took her hands away from the bandolier. Her Goldenhand was glowing more brightly than usual, she noted. And I like that later on she's sort of thinking to herself, I am most definitely going to get rid of this glow spell because this is very, very irritating. And she's looking at like the charter marks that she doesn't recognize, trying to memorize them so that she can look them up later, but she can't even keep them in her hand long enough. And poor Nicholas is still asleep, like passed out. He doesn't even know what the hell is going on right now. And it's she keeps her hand across the bells, and it says they didn't stir again, which confirmed her suspicion that it was an interaction that required the power inherent in the wall, not just the free magic that lurked within Nicholas Sayre, which I find pretty interesting. Was it like the wall defending itself against Nicholas Sayre? Is that why so much like free magic was dumped into him as well? Was that supposed to be like defensive? Because she says that he's sort of infused with free magic, and that's what the wall is meant to guard against. So I guess that is what it is they're just trying to load him up with, because he has a connection to the charter. So maybe the wall's reaction to him and pouring extra charter magic into him, that is how it reacts when it's something that can be mitigated, rather than something that just needs to be destroyed or sent into death or whatever. Okay, so yeah, this is when Captain Anlo comes out. Up until a few minutes ago, the captain had been the very model of a tough officer of the guard, willing to take on anything, and in the process show the young person in waiting that she knew best. But now she's a little bit shaken, and it's just like, what was that, and is it going to happen again? She says, I don't know, his charter mark is unsullied, but he is full of free magic, so I don't really know what's going on. Plus, he's lost blood. And I put healing spells on him, but they're taking forever, and he's still really, really weak. And Clariel, man. I talk about, like, poor Nicholas, and I stand by that because he really has been put through the ringer. But also poor Clariel, man. She's just trying to live, and she just keeps getting handed fucking crisis after crisis. So Anlo tells her our chief healer is at Barhedron, but Clariel is already like, this is a weird thing though. Like, your healer, I don't think they are going to know what to do with this. And she sort of, I think, expects a little bit of pushback when she says that. But instead, Anlo's like, oh, really? So do you need to take him to Belisare? That's no big deal. Sure, go. That's fine. Take him. That's no big deal. And I like that a lot. She's just like, I don't know what this is, and I kind of don't want it here. Thank you. Bye. So let's see. Oh, right. So this is when Clariel comes to the conclusion that she needs to go to the glacier, to the Claire's glacier, because she has never heard of this before, what's going on with him. And she believes that the only way to find out what's going on is going to a huge library with people who are amazing healers, who have like future sight, all of the knowledge and potential for knowledge at their disposal. And it's mentioned that she has been invited back a couple of times. And Sabriel has even mentioned to her, like, hey, maybe you should go home and visit the people that you grew up with and, like, you know, reconnect a little bit. But Clariel has been very resistant. And I think she says at one point that she was feeling weird about going back to a place where they had cast her out, and says, even though I know they don't see that as the way it happened, I do. And they can call it whatever they want, but they kicked my ass out. And that's the fucking fact of it. And, oh man, I get it. Like, I got really impatient with Clariel during her first book, because all she wanted to do was be a Claire. And even though she was given a wild, very unusual gift and a very specific mission, she still was like holding on to, but I want to have the sight and I want to be one of you, and I can't believe this isn't going to happen for me. And I was like really frustrated. Like, don't you see how much better and more awesome and badass all of this is? But as much as I can see that and get frustrated with her and feel like, because she was so very dramatic about how upset she was, even while they were telling her she had this great fucking destiny ahead of her. When you pull back and look at it at this level, where these are people that raised her, but then she never really became one of them, and they sort of like sent her on her way with minimal information, I can see having some baggage remaining about that. You know, you can recognize that fate, if that's what you want to call it, had greater things in store for you, and understand that your mother was like a mixture, or that your parents were a mixture, because her mother was a Claire, but her father wasn't a person. You can know that, but it's different to feel like the people that raised you and whom you depended on saw you as like something other. And that can be a weird feeling where they're not supposed to put you apart in that way. And it can be a strange feeling to realize that adults who are in charge sort of knew before you did that you weren't like them, and that you were still clinging to this idea that you could eventually be one of them, even though they knew full and goddamn well that was never going to be possible. So yeah, I'm just saying, I kind of get it. So she's also a little bit worried because she has to fly a paper wing in order to get him back, and she's never flown one with a passenger before. And she's like, not only is it weird to be flying with a passenger when she hasn't, and she's not totally sure it's going to be the same, but Nick is going to have to sit behind her. And I thought it was interesting that Clariel is worried enough about that to kind of be like, ooh, I wish it wasn't that way though, because Nick has free magic in him, and she is a little worried that perhaps it will take him over at one point and do something and consume him. And so all of this is just, she's like simultaneously trying to look out for him, simultaneously worried about him and worried for herself. There's a lot happening here. And she says that, yeah, she's going to go by paper wing. I'll need to send a message hawk to Belissaire, to Princess Elamir, one to Magistrix Cole. And Anlo says that she has a score of hawks and that they can take any of them that she needs. She was wondering what exactly she should say to Elamir in the limited space provided by a message hawk's little brain. Sabriel and Touchstone also needed to be informed, but though perhaps not until they returned. And Sam should also be told. In fact, Sam might well be able to help work out exactly what was going on with Nick. He had already explored different paths of charter magic for most mages, and though it was mostly to do with making things, he might have a particular insight. Besides, Nick was one of Sam's closest friends. I liked that it ended with, he's just his close friend and he really should know. Correct. Even if it weren't about the magic thing, you should fucking tell him for sure. So Anlo tells her that there is a charter stone coming up on the top of this hill, and maybe we want to keep this kid away from him, or away from it. And though the charter was generally benevolent, that benevolence might be a weighted thing where some greater good would be gained at the cost of trouble to those locally involved. Even death, blindness, or permanent stilling of a tongue, as happened when people tried to command charter magic beyond their ability or experience, thus preventing larger trouble by stopping an individual doing something irrevocably stupid. Which, I don't feel like we've come across permanent damage like that before. The most we've really seen is Clariel when she stops the Stilken. I think it's called a Stilken, and she uses charter magic that burns her throat and like leaves her without a voice for a little while. But that wasn't a permanent error. And she clearly learned her lesson, and I could see the charter going hard if somebody has done something multiple times and the charter is starting to kind of like realize, in as much as something, I don't know if I want to call it unconscious, but maybe the charter will have started to catch on that like this person's going to keep on fucking trying. So maybe we just need to take their voice forever because we can't risk this sort of thing. So there's a couple other things where Captain Anlo says something to her and she realizes, here it is. Your paper wing is close to the stone. I'll move it, but why take him to Barhadrin anyway? If you go ahead, you can fly back, easily land on the flat here and take him away. And Clariel is just realizing that she's super distracted. And this captain is coming up with much better ideas because she's actually thinking ahead and being efficient. Whereas Clariel herself is too busy thinking like 17 steps ahead. So Clariel, like the captain stops and says, "Are you afraid for us or for him?" And Clariel's like, oh, a little bit of both. Like, I'm going to leave you here with Nick, but he has enough free magic in him that he may draw undead shit to him. So just keep an eye out. And then we get chapter 11. And this is when the first, I guess, witch or wizard, like they keep calling them different things, which I kind of like, that these people from lands that we don't really know a lot about are using different language, calling them witches and shamans. But one of them is wounded, and it does not seem to actually change the level of the chanting or anything. And Farron is very disappointed. And Carilge says, good shooting, nevertheless, if that was their wind eater. And Farron's like, yeah, that would be good. The air remained completely still, the raider drawing closer. I'm so out of time here. Push me over the side, croaked Farron. All was lost now. Her message, the Athesk people, but there was no reason for these kind fisherfolk to die as well. Can we just talk about this for just a second? I know I'm over time, but like Farron is a lunatic. These people could have brought you back right away and saved you if they had listened and taken you seriously. And you are still going, you guys don't deserve to die, which they don't, granted, but that is an unremarkably, I mean, I just don't think I could resist the pettiness of being like, maybe if you had fucking brought me back, you wouldn't be caught in the middle of this, Carilge. Ugh. So they begin to fire back, and Carilge very nearly gets hit. And Farron realizes that either the archer is extremely good, and then goes, oh, maybe he's not, because he's not going after Carilge. He's going after me. Fuck. The next arrow went wide as Carilge steered the boat a little off the wind and then on again, their wake showing a sudden kink. The arrow after that went into the sea a dozen paces short. You're a brave lass, and your shot saved us, I reckon. Nothing's ever sure at sea, but there's a good chance now we'll have you ashore soon after dawn and to the healer. And she asks how long it is to get to the glacier and how she gets there. And Carilge gives her some vague instructions and is like, it might, there might be easier ways, but I'll tell you my way. And it takes 5 or 6 days. Farron tried to say more, but then passed out, and Carilge caught her head as the young woman's eyes rolled back and she slumped sideways. Laying her carefully on the deck, the captain looked over the stern again. The raider was still lit by the red fires that were not fires. The oars were pulling at the same swift pace as called by the sorcerers, but it was falling behind with every minute. Despite this, the raider was still following them. And Carilge is sort of like, man, I really thought that we'd get to Yellow Sands and we would be like kind of done. But what if we get there and these guys keep on pursuing us? That's just a fishing village. And I don't know what they can do to the people here. So she asks her son if Megril, who is, I think, one of the elders in the town, let's see. Oh, no, he's not an elder. He's young and a constable. I forgot. That asked whether or not she has a message hawk, because they may need to call for help. So I feel like that's about, yeah. They ask her about the catch, and she says we leave it, and they're all just like, what? Are you serious after all of this? And honestly, at this point, I want to be like charitable and be like, wow, she's finally realizing, but I can't. I'm just still too irritated. This wouldn't have happened if you had just listened to the fucking person talking to you with very reasonable requests from the beginning. But anyway, it's fine. So trying to see if there was anything. I think that's it. Yeah, that's pretty much it. The captain forgot the buoy and went forward, one eye on the sails, ready to call for them to be trimmed if she saw them shiver or heard them flapping. Farron lay on the deck near Lone's feet. She was quiet, no longer writhing with fever, simply a lump under her fur cloak. Only sign she was still alive, the occasional quiver of her lower lip as she breathed in and out. And that is the end of chapter 11. So I'm over time. But thank you guys very, very much for hanging out with me. Thank you to Yama for commissioning this episode. And to Ayantu for being here in the chat with us. I hope you guys are enjoying the coverage. This book is really different. I really have been enjoying it. And I'll see you again soon with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.